welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSeco. So today we will have two articles for our discussion. The first is from the Hindu newspaper, which is titled as Making the Grassroots Stronger. So this talks about that how can we make the Panchayati Raj institution system, or the third tier of the system in government, of the system of governance, stronger, and what steps can we take in this direction. And the second article is from the Indian Express, which is titled as Main Census with Caste Counting. This article, though we have covered almost previously as well, which talks about the viability of the caste census and how much is it possible in the current situation, or what can be the obstacles that might come on the way, have been discussed here. This newspaper analysis is presented by me. My name is Sheva Khan. I am a BA LLB law graduate and I have completed my law degree from Uttaranchal University in the year 2019. I completed my degree with a gold medal in my batch. I've also been a national debater and a public speaker, and here at LawSeco, I'm working as the manager for current affairs vertical. If you wish to connect with me, you can find me on my Twitter as well as LinkedIn handles. Both are available in the description box below. Let's see what is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. World Trade Organization is headquartered in. Your options are Washington, DC, Rome, Madrid, or Geneva. If you know the answer, you can put it down in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question for the day. How can Panchayati Raj institutions be made stronger in India? Give suggestions. So let's start our discussion for the first article of the day, which talks about making Panchayati Raj institutions stronger. So this year basically witnessed the rollouts of People's Plan campaign and the vibrant Gram Sabha dashboard. So in a way, we can see that there are some advancements that we can see in the Panchayati Raj institutions, and definitely we need to focus upon having the bottom-up approach. Now, having the bottom-up approach is something, of course, is contrary to having the bottom-down approach or the top-down approach. So basically, when we talk about the bottom-up approach, we basically mean that the resources or all the things that are required for growth, they are percolated from the downwards and then they move towards the upward direction, which means that the institutions or the authorities or the anything that is available or that is actually at the downward side of the pyramid, that is also given equal resources. Now, when we talk about the governance system in India, after the 73rd Amendment and after the 74th, but specifically here if we talk about the Panchayati Raj institutions, so after the 73rd Amendment, the Panchayati Raj or the Panchayats, they were actually given a constitutional status. Now when this happened, so first of all we had the central government, then we had the state governments, and for the village level we now had constitutionally recognized Panchayati Raj institutions. And that is why, as in a pyramid, we can see that it is at the bottommost position. Now, when we talk about having the bottom-up approach, it means that we would be giving due importance and facilities to this particular institution. Here in our case is the Panchayati Raj institutions as well. So let's talk about it. So the pandemic affected people across all the stratas. Yes, of course, that's true. Now, while the top disaster management was compromised, Panchayati Raj institutions played a remarkable role in first, the risk reduction, secondly, swift reaction in times of emergencies saved lives, and thirdly, performed regulatory and welfare functions as well. So we can say that maybe in some situations, given situations, even the central and the state government did not perform that well, but the Panchayati Raj institutions at the village level played a very strong role in mitigating the effects of COVID-19 and also providing various kinds of facilities to the people who were suffering either from the COVID-19 or the families or the kins who actually could not survive the pandemic. So an instance of this is when the PRI, that is the Panchayati Raj institutions, set up quarantine centers, arranged transport and arranged housing and food facilities for the migrant workers as well. So the National Rural Livelihood Mission ensured support to marginal communities in times of that were hard times, and thus it actually provided them with right kind of employment and also the livelihood benefits as well. So the Gram Sabhas act as a sounding board for diverse ideas and opinions as well. Now here the Gram Sabhas were definitely the area, the place where a lot of discussions took place and important decisions were also taken up here. So they also played an effective role in bridging the trust gap between the community and the officials. See, many a times the officials, the authorities who come from the government offices, it becomes difficult for them to entrust or basically to gain the trust of the people who belong to the villages or other such local communities. Now, in such situation, Gram Sabhas are the joining link, or basically these are the bridging links that actually make the people from various communities build their trust in the authorities of the government, which ultimately makes it possible that the policies of the government can come up and benefit the people. So this was done by actively engaging with the ASHA and the Anganwadi workers. Now, as we know about the ASHA workers, who are the accredited social health activists, and the Anganwadi workers, who definitely have played such an important role when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically if we talk about the vaccination drives as well. So the ASHA and the Anganwadi workers, mostly they come up from the rural areas. In this situation, they actively got engaged, and they also built the trust of the people in the policies of the government, and this actually bridged the gap between the two. So mobilizing the citizens for the success of the vaccination drives, another noteworthy achievement of the PRIs. Yes, of course, what we were talking about. Now, this article also talks about the steps that can be taken to make the Panchayati Raj institutions stronger. So it talks about the Yokohama strategy. So it says that the Yokohama strategy showed that disaster prevention and mitigation was just as important as disaster response. So basically, this strategy talks about that. Of course, if at all a disaster occurs, then of course we should be way too responsive to it, and we should be reacting in the right manner. But this also realizes that the importance, that how much the response to a disaster is important, equally prevention of the disaster is also important. So when we talk about, the very common saying that prevention is better than cure, so yes, of course, the Yokohama strategy also relies upon it, that we should not only work in mitigating the disasters once it has happened, but also we should try to prevent the disaster in the very first place. So it says that the capacity of the PRIs can be built up in the respect through, firstly, including disaster management chapters in the Panchayati Raj Acts. Secondly, conducting location-specific training programs. For example, there is a particular area, there is a particular place that is more prone to, let's say, floods. Another might be more prone to earthquakes. Now, another area might be more prone to cyclones. So in this regard, the people, the local people, authorities, and everyone should be accordingly trained depending upon what are the risks that are attached to a particular geographical area. And thirdly, community-based disaster management plans should be made wherein all the people from different levels, from different positions can be engaged into the disaster management plans. Let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about the viability of the caste census. So the Indian census is a pageantry of statistics rallying the biggest administrative capacity, and the demand of caste census along with the general census poses practicality considerations. Now, we have been discussing this from so long time now that the normal census is fine, but when we talk about having a caste census wherein we would actually be calculating that what number of people belong to what kind of caste and which category do they fall in, this actually seems out to be easier said than done, because we have a lot of issues in this. Let's consider that what are the evident issues that have been mentioned in the article. So the first issue is of the misclassification, where people use their clan, caste and subcaste interchangeably. So there is no clear division as such that someone belonging to a particular caste might also have a particular subcaste. So that is where there are a lot of gray zones and gray areas, which definitely would be a question of argument, and that might create a lot of confusion once, if at all, we try to do the caste census. Then the phonetic and spelling variants, all right, they also alone would further bloat the actual number. Now here, a very small example, you must have noticed that some people, like maybe if they have a surname called as Agrawal, so some call it as Agarwal, some call it as Agrawal. Then there are different spellings and different phonetics, which means the pronunciations of various castes are different, due to which there is a good chance that there might be some differences as to why some people use as Agrawal or some as Agarwal. This is just for an example purpose, okay? There might be some various other names and phonetics as well that might cause confusion. So in this situation, there might be a chance that again the problem of categorization may take place. Now, the SECC of Maharashtra is a proof of the inaccuracies, and in this case with over 1.18 crore errors. So due to this, so basically it was the socioeconomic caste census that actually had taken place in Maharashtra. So there it had so many errors, and due to this, the data was also never made out publicly available, because there were so many errors and it could never be used for any kind of reference or anything like that. So further, on 7th January 2020, the government already mentioned the 31 caste questions to be asked. Adding further questions at this point is not feasible. So if at all, if they say that maybe we can add a few more questions to make things clearer, then again, there are problems of feasibility and viability again. So adding the OBC categories to the digital entry drop-down list is also a cumbersome process and impractical, to say the least. So moreover, the constitutional mandate to take note of the SCs and STs is also not easy to be done. So whilst this deadlock is going on, certain states have decided to do their own census, like Karnataka and Telangana, and Kerala also is to follow the suit for better socio-economic development policy changes. So here the article says that what should we do actually right now? So it says that the first and the easiest solution is to let the states go ahead on their own. So yes, of course, let's see that whatever outcomes the states might have, though we have an example of Maharashtra where it was not so successful, but maybe in the cases of Karnataka, Telangana and Kerala, we might find out or we might stumble upon some good idea to do so. Then such a measure does not require the approval of the center. So the article says that we can just let the states do the way they want to do it right now. And the issue arises on how will the union government record such data. So previously, the Supreme Court had discarded this approach, and most notably in the case of Pattali Makal Kachi versus Union of India. But let's see that what does the outcome come in the coming future. So that was all for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. Thank you so much for staying tuned with LawSikho. And please do not forget to catch the podcast discussion of the very same analysis on Spotify, Google, Anchor, as well as Apple Podcast. Also, if you wish to download the PDF of today's slides, you can join a Telegram channel. The link is there in the description box below. Or you can simply scan the QR code that you can see on your screens right now. For other crisp and exam-oriented content, do not forget to follow us on our official Instagram channels for LawSikho Judiciary, CLAT Prep, UGC Net, and LawSikho Law Finance. Thank you so much.